The Baltimore Ravens make a flurry of moves on Wednesday as they trade Morgan Moses to the New York Jets. They restructure Ronnie Stanley. They cut Tyus Bowser. What does it all mean and what comes next for the Ravens? All that and more on today's Instant Reaction Live edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. As always, thank you so much for being here with me today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day or of the afternoon as we're here 1:30 p.m. on Wednesday. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube. You can like this video, subscribe to the channel there. If you're an audio listener, you can follow along anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. We're bringing you 5 days a week Ravens content, so news, analysis, updates, plus obviously bonus content like these live shows after every piece of Ravens big news. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Well, the Ravens have stayed quite busy today, haven't they, on Wednesday, is they've made a couple of moves that I think a lot of people were expecting, but one that wasn't as expected. So the Ravens, they restructure Ronnie Stanley. That was pretty expected. They cut Tyus Bowser. We've been talking about that one for honestly probably months, ever since that injury situation got weird. But then the Morgan Moses trade happens. The Ravens trade Morgan Moses to the New York Jets. We'll get into the specifics of the deal in a couple of minutes here. But that was one that I think caught a lot of people off guard. And with John Simpson already gone to the Jets, Morgan Moses now gone too, Kevin Zeitler's a free agent, you have three holes on your offensive line, potentially, if Zeitler doesn't come back, that you have to fill with new players. So we're going to be talking about what the offensive line could look like, what they're looking for on the offensive line, and we'll talk about that throughout the week here as well. So these live shows are fun. If you have any comments on what the Ravens are doing, you want to share your thoughts, obviously put those in the chat, and I'll try to get to as many as I can there. Also, I'll do one brief maintenance note on the live show we did yesterday. Somehow the wrong audio form got in there for the Derrick Henry reaction stream. It's been fixed for, a while now. But if you tune into that very early on in the audio form, video, or I guess the audio form recording was the one from 2 days ago. I apologize for that. I don't know how it happened. I literally edited the show. But it's fixed now, so you can go listen to that if you didn't have the opportunity because it was not the right audio file. I'll make sure that doesn't happen this time around, though, because these are big moves. And again, we're not going to go live after every single, the Ravens have restructured this guy or that guy. But again, when something like this happens, you have to figure we have to talk about stuff like this. So the Morgan Moses trade, let's start with that one because I think that's what most people are talking about right now. The actual terms of the deal, I'm pulling them up quickly, but Baltimore essentially swaps fourth-round picks with the Jets and also picks up a sixth-rounder. So the Jets receive Morgan Moses and Baltimore's fourth-round pick, 134, which is actually their compensatory pick. And then the Ravens receive the Jets' fourth-rounder, so number 112, and their sixth-rounder, number 218, which I also believe that sixth-round pick is a compensatory pick for the Jets. So look, those compensatory picks, they have value. And so they're not only, you get a pick to draft somebody, but you can move them around in trades. So Baltimore essentially moves up 22 spots in the fourth round and picks up a sixth rounder for trading Morgan Moses away. Now, Morgan Moses is a really talented player. He's someone that, again, is a little up there in age. I think he'll be 33 by the time the season starts, but he graded out as a top 10 run blocker last year. And for him, he kind of had that run pass versatility. Now, obviously, he had to be rotated in and out because he was dealing with injuries. But before coming to Baltimore, he had a pretty big Ironman streak that he was touting. So for me, this move is not one that I'm overly concerned with, but it is one where the Ravens are now going to have to replace him. Where if you move on from a guy, it's any guy. If they had moved on from Stanley, we'd be having the same conversation. You now have to get a player because the Ravens are in a window where you're not trying to rebuild, right? These are the prime competitive years of the Baltimore Ravens in the Lamar Jackson era. Morgan Moses graded out as a pretty solid tackle. This is not a bad player, but the Ravens save about $4.5 million on this move, $4 million, which is fine. But what's the Ravens' plan? When you talk about the offensive line, do the Ravens want to get more athletes? Do they want to get younger? I mean, clearly it looks like they do. They have a couple of guys waiting in the wings to take over potentially, especially at guard, where you could argue an Andrew Voorhees, a Ben Cleveland could be some of those options. But you're not trying to slide Patrick McCary in there. If I'm the Ravens, personally, I'm not trying to do that because I value him more as a super sick sub-offensive lineman. So who replaces him? Obviously, this tackle class is very, very deep in the draft. I'd be shocked if the Ravens didn't end up taking a tackle in the first round because you have a couple of different options that you could be looking at. But in my opinion, yeah, Baltimore has a lot of different options that they could use, but I think you're kind of narrowing down how you use that pick with these moves. Could it be an edge rusher? Sure. Could it be a wide receiver? Sure. Could it be a corner? Sure. But the way this tackle class is stacked, you can honestly argue the point from two different ways. You could argue it from, well, it's so deep, there are going to be talented guys in the second round, which is true. I'm not debating that. But there are probably 7 or 8 first-round tackles, and maybe if the Ravens want to trade back potentially, right? You could do that and just make it get an extra second, an extra third. You move back just a couple spots, and maybe your guy is still there. But then maybe there's an opportunity for Baltimore to go out and make another trade. Maybe you bring in a tackle. Maybe do you sign a Tyron Smith or a David Bakhtiari for a veteran option? I'm not necessarily sure what they do, but for the Ravens, yeah, there are a couple of different options that could work out for them. But for Moses, they're not getting rid of a bad player per se. I just think it's more of the realm of like, yeah, Baltimore has all these different options, but you're looking at everything. You're looking at what you're weighing for the actual veterans on the team versus the young guys. You weigh one, you weigh the other. I think there has to be some sort of a balance. Linderbaum at this point, year 3, still the young guy. Ronnie Stanley's the veteran on that roster. If Kevin Zeitler comes back, then yeah, you have an option that is a veteran and he is your staple veteran. But we could see a Voorhees come in his first full NFL season coming off the injury. We could see a Ben Cleveland come in who now is in year 4, but is that somebody that the Ravens want to actually use? Or is Cleveland's in either year 3 or 4? I can't even remember. It's the draft class is meshed together for me. But in my opinion, you gotta, I think, bring in one veteran, whether it's a trade, whether it's a signing. Young guys are great. Young guys are awesome. And I expect the Ravens to draft a tackle. The tackle market, and even we've seen with the guard market, Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis, etc. Even John Simpson got $9 million per season, which is a lot more. So the actual trade itself, the compensation itself wasn't bad for the Ravens. I think moving up essentially 22 spots plus getting a 6th for Morgan Moses and swapping that 4th in there is fine. I think Morgan Moses, what I read was he was valued at about a 5th rounder, a late 5th rounder. So you're swapping 4ths and getting a 6th. That's pretty equal trade value, all things considered. But in my opinion, I just think what Baltimore has right now are a bunch of questions about, well, what is their offensive line going to look like? Because you bring in Derrick Henry and he's awesome, but for me, it all starts in the trenches, right? It all starts up front because if Derrick Henry, he by himself can throw guys off of him, can bulldoze people, Lamar can juke guys out of his shoes and make magic happen. But you also have to think this isn't just a run game thing. You also have to pass block. And the Ravens had multiple different pass blocking issues last season where guys were beating, for example, Ronnie Stanley off the edge quickly, forcing strip sacks on Lamar. Lamar didn't have time to throw or escape and do his magic. So I think athletes are key for them, especially in an offense now, which we don't know how it's going to look like in particular. Gus Edwards is gone. J.K. Dobbins looks to be on the way out. Are the Ravens going to use as many to-the-edge runs, or are they just going to try to pound it up the middle, get back to that ground and pound, heavy sets, use play action off of that? You can do a bunch of different things with Derrick Henry, but you have to have the offensive line to, 1, block for him in the run game, and 2, block for Lamar Jackson as a passer, because we saw way too often last season the lack of pure pass blocking, the lack of protection for Lamar Jackson. You have quality pieces, right? Linderbaum is there. He's your long-term center. I'm 100% on board with that. But who are the other guys that are going to make an impact? Is Stanley going to get back to some level of a form? Was the knee injury really the thing that was holding him back? He took the restructure. We're going to get to that in the second part of the show coming up in just a minute. But I think that the Ravens were expected to move off of one of their tackles. Ronnie Stanley had a lot of dead money. We don't know the restructure terms. Maybe they've come out and I haven't seen them. But at the time of this recording, I don't know what the Ravens are looking at in terms of savings with Ronnie Stanley, but you free up the cap space with Tyus Bowser. We'll talk about that as well. Morgan Moses, again, gives you that $4 to $5 million in open cap. There are avenues for the Ravens to improve their offensive line here, but that's the key word, right? Improve. You got to get someone equal to or better than Morgan Moses in there for a bunch of different reasons. Something where Baltimore has maybe equal or better to Kevin Zeitler, equal or better to John Simpson. You're trying to improve. Some of those options are probably going to be internal, but you also have to look at external guys too, whether that be the draft or veterans in free agency. I see Tremor Pole saying EDC is just straight cooking today and yesterday. Yeah, it's freeing up cap space and he's able to get Derrick Henry on board. Yeah, he's doing some good stuff, and I'm excited to see how it pans out for him. Jen saying more than likely we'll take a tackle in the draft in the first round. I have to agree with that. So many good tackle prospects. A guy who could maybe go like 15 in a not-so-loaded draft class, maybe 20 in a not-so-loaded draft class is probably going to fall. There could be two of those guys falling to Baltimore at 30. Is that a J.C. Latham? Is that a Armarius Mims? Is that a Tyler Guyton? Is that a There are a lot of guys. Troy Fautano, I don't think falls anymore after his combine, but yeah, a lot of options for Baltimore coming up. And coming up in the second part of the show, we're going to be talking about Ronnie Stanley's restructure, what it means for him, what the Ravens actually need from him in 2024. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on this episode of Locked on Ravens, live coming to you on a Wednesday afternoon. First, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. And with BetterHelp, I mean, there's a lot of good things that therapy brings to the table. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you go for a run? Would you take a nap? Would you read a book? Show up for a friend? A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is for what? Is that if the time was limited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze in that special thing to your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. And therapy has so many benefits. For example, you can learn positive coping skills, how to set boundaries. You can empower you to become the best version of yourself. And it's just those who've experienced major trauma. It's for everyone. Everything has started major therapy. Give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockdown today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockdown. We're back our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allstriker still talking with you here. We have so many live episodes here. It's really fun, especially because with Baltimore, free agency, sometimes they don't make a move for a while. Other times they do. The first day of free agency was a little lull period for them. They lost some guys, but Derrick Henry comes out on the second day. And now the third day, we're getting a lot of moves. And honestly, the Ravens could make more moves, but if they do, what are we going to do? We're going to go live again on Locked On Ravens. We'll grind it out. So we got the Moses trade to the Jets. We talked about that. Let's talk about the other offensive line move Baltimore has made today on day 3, and that is restructuring Ronnie Stanley. Now, I wish that we actually knew the terms of this. Again, I've been looking for it. I've been waiting for it. Well, obviously, when we get that, it'll probably be out by the time we record tomorrow's episode. So be sure to stay tuned for that to actually get the specifics of the restructure. But Ronnie Stanley had a 26.2, 26.3 cap hit coming into this year. It was just too much. That was too much. Now, you could have released him and saved about $15 million with a post-June 1 designation. Without the post-June 1, would have been about $9 million. This was always the most realistic option to me, where, again, I wasn't expecting them to trade Morgan Moses away, but there had to be some sort of a restructure with Ronnie Stanley, where if he didn't agree to that, the Ravens probably cut him, because you can't have him be playing at that $26.2 million with the unfortunate injury history, with the drop-off of play we've seen from him. The Ravens need Ronnie Stanley to be Ronnie Stanley. He is going to be the left tackle in 2024. They are banking on him to get up to, and again, do they have to have him be prime Ronnie Stanley, like what we've seen peak Ronnie Stanley? They don't have to have him be that guy, but they have to have him be not a liability. And we saw Ronnie Stanley be a liability more times than I think a lot of people would have liked to see, more times than the Ravens would have liked to see. And so this is probably it for Ronnie Stanley if he can't get it together in 2024. They can move off of his contract next year. I'll pull it up quickly as I'm talking, but they can save, I think it's $20 million or so next year if they release him. The out is next year. I mean, you could have released him this year, and that's fine. But Stanley's going to have another $26.2 million hit next year. But the difference is the dead cap would only be 17. Oh, well, I guess, is the restructure here? I don't know. But I see on Spotrac it's a 17. Oh, no, I'm looking at the wrong year. It's 26.7. Here we go. 26.7 million in 2025, only $6 million in dead cap. So, yes, they can essentially save $20 million by releasing Ronnie Stanley next year. Now, does that change at all with the restructure? Are those terms different now? That was his previous contract. But this, I mean, you're not having Ronnie Stanley next year on another $26 million dead cap hit. It's just not happening. you can save. Again, I'm taking that $20 million. If Stanley even has a resurgent year, I don't think I'm even keeping him for $20 million then, right? I still think with him and the injury history, he's going to be 30. He just turned 29, so he's going to be 30 by the time next season starts, so the season after this one. I think at that point, you either have to look to bring him back on a cheaper deal. Maybe you just restructure, you extend him at that point. You can do that. But that $20 million would be a godsend for the Ravens if they were to get that, at least in that term of what they can do. So you got to, again, it's like weighing the factors. So essentially, you got to weigh for Baltimore, Ronnie Stanley, if he comes back and gives you that production versus $20 million, right? The $20 million to me, left tackles are hard to find. Tackles are hard to find. Offensive linemen are hard to find. But you still have to be prepared here because the Ravens, and I had talked about this on Locked On Ravens, Baltimore only had one long-term piece. One long-term piece on the offensive line, and that was Tyler Linderbaum. Stanley is not a long-term piece. We knew Morgan Moses wasn't a long-term piece. We knew John Simpson wasn't a long-term piece. We know Kevin Zeitler, even if he comes back, isn't a long-term piece. So Baltimore's going to have to go through this pretty big offensive line overhaul, and it's going to be interesting to see, again, what they value. Do they value young guys? Do they want to put in more stopgap options that are more athletic? Do they value young athletes in general in terms of drafting players like that? Do they go with high traits? Do they go with production? We're going to see, and I see Baltimore get up saying they're going to make some moves for an offensive line or for offensive line in general, whether that's the draft or free agency. I could see it. I could 100% see it, especially because with Baltimore, I mean, look, you could go into the year with guys on your roster. You could have Voorhees at left guard. You could have Ben Cleveland at right guard. You could slot Falele in there, which is another option. They could have a Falele trust circle. They could have put him in that circle of trust and said, you know what? We're going to trust Daniel Falele this year. I would probably still draft a guy, right? I'd definitely do that, but it's going to be interesting because I think Falele showed flashes. I mean, he was part of that rotation. He played meaningful snaps for them last season, and I don't know. It just feels like for Baltimore, they're going to have a lot of different options, but they have to pick the right path because there's so many different paths, but the offensive line has to, and we talked about this earlier, they have to run block and they have to pass protect. But pass protection, we knew they were a good run blocking team, but they couldn't pass protect consistently, and that was one of the downfalls of the team. Now, obviously, the big one was they didn't run the ball in the AFC Championship game, but we saw time and time again Stanley get beat along the edge. I mean, we saw it with Charles Menahue, right? That fumble in the AFC Championship game, that strip sack, Ronnie Stanley got beat by Charles Menahue. That was a big turning point in that game. So it all starts up front, all starts in the trenches, and I'm going to be interested to see for Baltimore also what they decide to do with their sets, because in 2019 we saw them go all over the place in terms of their 3 tight end sets and running heavy sets and things like that. But in my opinion, you have to have a balance of that. You can still run 2 tight end sets, right? Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, how are they going to mesh on the field together too? You're going to put them in line together, run play action off of that. That's what made the Ravens so deadly in 2019. And we're far, far, far past. I mean, literally 5 years ago today, the Ravens signed Mark Ingram, right? So we're far past 2019, but part of what made that offense so successful was the fact that they were able to just dupe defenses with running versus passing. The RPOs were successful because they would bring in heavy sets with Nick Boyle and Hayden Hurst and Mark Andrews, and then they'd either run play action off of that, or they would just run the ball and they'd be able to block effectively enough to where it was just consistent. So we're going to see, I think there's going to be some level of a balance between heavy sets, athletes, and just getting guys in there that can pave the way. Road graders. Shout out to Cole Jackson there with the road graders for Derrick Henry. That's something I'm looking forward to for Baltimore. I see Derek Norman saying, do we still have McCary? We do still have McCary. The Ravens have McCary. He's under contract. They could save some cap by releasing him actually, but at the time of this recording, he is still on the roster. I see the Hawk TV saying Simpson and Moses are Jets. Yeah, but the New York Jets are apparently the Baltimore Jets or the New York Ravens. That Joe Douglas being over there, that's been a big thing for a while, where Joe Douglas has been stealing Ravens players, and does not change this time around with Joe Douglas over there. I see Wadislav saying, I'm not a fan of us trading players to division rivals, but if it's outside, I'm generally fine with it. Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, the Jets aren't a team that I'm necessarily uber worried about. If it was the Steelers, if it was the Bengals, for example, would have been a bit of a different story. But yeah, I think for Baltimore, The Jets are fine, right? They need offensive line help. It was a good deal for both sides. AFC, maybe you can see Morgan Moses in the playoffs potentially, but I'm not too worried about, with the Jets, him being there. Again, if we saw like a Patrick Queen move or we saw a Geno Stone move, would have been a bit of a different story with that. And the Hawks saying they must believe more he's in Cleveland that much. I think they do. I think, Cleveland has shown them some stuff. Now he's been up and down, right? But I think he has shown some good. Voorhees is someone that, again, Baltimore drafted Voorhees. They traded back into the draft. They traded a 6th-round pick this year for a 7th-round pick last year to take Voorhees because he was that good at USC, but then tore the ACL at the combine, and that's where a lot of people were saying, well, he lost all his value. But he was projected to go right in like the 3rd or 4th round. I think he was like a very early 4th round, like right around where Daniel Falele went back when he was drafted. I'm fine with them making that trade. He's a high-level player, a very smart, high IQ guy. So I think that they're going to have at least one of Voorhees in Cleveland starting next year and then maybe looking to replace Morgan Moses with a new tackle in the draft. I see Black Danner saying we appreciate you, KO. I appreciate you for tuning in. It's been, these live shows are really fun. I'm really excited to keep doing them. And coming up in the final part of the show, we'll be talking more about Tyus Bowser and his release from the team, talking about his tenure and what the Ravens could do with the edge position. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a lot to get to on this episode of Locked on Ravens Live, coming to you on Wednesday afternoon. First, this show is brought to you by Game Time. There have been a lot of frustrating ticket buying experiences I've had in my life. Sometimes I wasn't sure if the seats were good. Other times I couldn't find last-minute tickets. Sometimes there are no good deals at all. Shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to a nice big event because Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With current last-minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And with Game Time, there are a bunch of different things coming up in the Baltimore area. The Orioles, they have opening day coming up. There are plenty of concerts as well. So really exciting. In Game Time, the app experience is great. They have last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, views from all your seats in the venue. Plus, Game Time's own ticketing app that gives you a complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Plus, they're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on those tickets. With zone deals, you pick the session, Game Time picks the seats for big-time savings. They also got to buy tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON, spelled LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're back, rounding out Locked On Ravens, our final segment of the show. Kevin Oestreicher, still talking with you here on this Wednesday. We're live here. The Ravens made a bunch of moves in a short amount of time, so I thought, why not go live and talk about them? We talked Morgan Moses trade. We talked Ronnie Stanley restructure. We talked, now we're going to talk Tyus Bowser being cut. Be sure to like and subscribe here on YouTube. Follow along in audio form as well. I really appreciate both the audio and video communities. We're building up something special here on Locked On Ravens. We bring you 5 days a week of Ravens content, Monday through Friday. So let's talk Tyus Bowser now. Bowser was released. It was a move that so many people expected, right? I mean, we were talking about it forever. If you're an everydayer on Locked On Ravens, you've been hearing me talk about it for a long time now. Bowser release saves about $5.5 million before factoring in everything that comes with the Ravens, and there's like a rule of 51 in that much. So it's more so maybe around 5. I'm going to pull up Brian McFarland, who we've had on the show, Ravens salary cap, who's done a lot of great work with the Ravens and getting everything salary cap related on the books for the Ravens. So the Moses deal, according to Brian, frees up $4.705 million in cap space. And then the Tyus Bowser move is about another $4.705 as well. And he guesses Ronnie Stanley will be anywhere in the $5.5 million range, maybe a little more than that as well. Just to round up the conversation about offensive line, I see a couple comments. Baltimore get up saying Voorhees was a late 3rd, early 4th for injury. Yep, 100%. It was a value pick for Baltimore. And Justin Peace saying also need to see what Amavai Laulu can do. Yeah, I think Salah's going to be a big part of what the Ravens do. Has potential. It's really big. But in my opinion, it's going to be interesting because the Ravens have a ton of different options. I see Cam Dom saying McCarry's a free agent. He's not. At least I don't think he. I mean, I've been saying he's not the whole time. He's under contract for 1 more season, I believe, on that extension he signed. It's a, I think you can save about $4 million. Maybe they made a move. I haven't seen if they've made a move, but McCarry's under contract right now for, where's his number? Yeah, here we go. You can save $4.3 million by releasing him. So not a terrible move, but I think that in my opinion, you're still keeping him, even though that is expensive for an offensive lineman that doesn't necessarily start. I still think that he is very valuable to the team. But let's get back to Bowser. Bowser was a really good player for the Ravens when he was healthy. And to me, it took a couple of years for him. I'll always tell this story about Tim Williams and Tyus Bowser. Both guys were drafted in 2017, and it took a while for both of them to get going, but the issue was Tim Williams never got going. And so by the time year 3 rolled around, the Ravens said, all right, we really need you to start going and doing things. This was 2019. Tyus Bowser started to take that step, and Tim Williams did not. The Ravens cut Tim Williams in the middle of 2019. They brought in Josh Bynes and LJ Fort, and Bowser took off from there. I mean, he turned himself into a really solid pass rusher, and pass coverage, he was incredible as well. He was super versatile, and he kind of fit the Ravens defense, and honestly fit kind of the mold of NFL defenses nowadays, which are honestly moving more towards positionless defenses. But it was a move that had to happen. Bowser and his injury, it didn't really work out just in terms of, I don't even know what it was. Like, I don't think anybody really knows what it was. He had the knee injury. Apparently it was like, was it inflammation? Did the tendon not heal? What was actually injured? We did not get a lot of information except for John Harbaugh saying, well, he's on track here, he's on track there, or he's not ready yet, he's not ready here. And it seemed like there was some level of disconnect almost between Baltimore and Bowser in terms of his injury status versus where he was versus where the team thought he was. I don't know what the whole deal was, but in my opinion, just gotta, I don't know, almost this was a move that was going to happen, right? It was never not going to happen. So this move frees up again about $4.7 million in cap space. Baltimore has a lot of different options they can use with that as well. So in my opinion, I don't know what necessarily happens with this whole thing in terms of Bowser landing on his feet somewhere else. I mean, the team's going to take a chance. He actually interviewed and said that, I'm ready to go. I'm fully healthy. But in my opinion, I don't necessarily know where the Ravens go with the edge position because both Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy, both free agents. Clowney's going to visit the Panthers, and we're going to see what happens there. It's maybe a hometown reunion for him. And again, I haven't seen, I'm trying to look right now. I haven't seen nothing I don't think has happened since the time I started recording this. But I don't know how the Ravens approach that because I think they're going to probably lose one, if not both of those guys. Plus, they're you can't put trust in David Ojabo. You can't put trust in Odafe Owe right now. So, I mean, for Owe, it's a little different because he has shown the flashes of Ojabo. It's like he hasn't shown anything. He's been injured for the past 2 seasons. But I think Owe's shown flashes of potential. But you'd feel a little better, I think, if there was a veteran alongside him that could really work out. So, Justin P. saying, do you think there'll be any more restructures before free agency? I keep seeing Humphrey as a possibility. I think Lamar is a big one. I think he can free about $11 million up. But again, is it too early, I guess, is the conversation around Lamar, right? Is it too early to almost restructure a guy like Lamar? It's only a year into his deal. So you could free up that money, but I think Lamar is probably the realistic option. You could also look to maybe extension restructure candidates like a Roquan or a Mark Andrews. So there are options, but we're going to see what happens. Baltimore get up saying going to be a lot of pancakes and business decisions being made thanks to that Ricard Henry duo and Linderbaum. Yeah, those three are, you got a solid core there. Now you just got to add around them, right? You got the physicality and everything going on. But I think for the Ravens, that's what you have to weigh with the offensive line. It's, do you want athletes who are a little more nimble and athletic in space, but aren't necessarily the big guys that can go and just absolutely win with strength? Or do you want to get those big strength guys that still have athleticism, but they're not necessarily combine stars or something like that? So it's going to be interesting to see what the actual approach on the offensive line is, much like the edge position, right? Both of those are going to be major, major needs now because even wide receiver, we can talk about wide receiver a little bit as well, where the only wide receiver not on the roster, or I guess on the roster after next year is Zay Flowers. So do the Ravens add a veteran? Are they freeing that cap space for a move like that? They've freed up a lot of cap space, and there still could be other moves made. This is not the end. And the Ravens did have to get not under it, but they had to be cap compliant in terms of bringing in Henry, that 2-year, $16 million deal. And obviously signing their rookie class as well is another option where they have to be cap compliant for that too. So Baltimore does have more ways they can free up money, and there are a lot of still quality free agents. Baltimore now with the Morgan Moses trade, I forgot to mention this, they have 9 picks in the draft. So overall, it's number 30 in the first round, number 62 in the second round, number 93 in the third round, number 113 in the fourth round, number 165 in the fifth round, number 218 in the sixth round, and number 228 and 250 in the seventh round. Oh, and I forgot, they have 130 as well in the fourth round. So 9 picks. I wouldn't be shocked if Eric DeCosta tries to trade 1 or 2 of those picks as well. Oh, and I see Countdown was talking about Kevin Zeitler. Yeah, Zeitler is a free agent. You're right there. So, whether it's bringing back Zeitler or adding in another Is it a free agent guard? You can do so many different ways, and there are about 3 or 4 different avenues for the Ravens to add offensive line and edge and whatever talent. But in my opinion, they have to balance it out. They have to, one, hit on their draft picks, and maybe this is Eric DeCosta trying to say, look, we understand that with a quarterback on the contract he's on, you can't just sign everybody in free agency. You have to try to hit on all the draft picks you can. And last year, they didn't really get a ton of production out of their draft class outside of Zay Flowers, the occasional flash from Tavius Robinson. I mean, Trenton Simpson played awesome in week 18, but you're looking more so at a team that knows that they have to hit on the veteran signings and hit on their draft picks, considering Lamar Jackson and these other big contracts, Matabike factored in there. They're going to have to talk about Linderbaum and Hamilton eventually. So as more big contracts come in, others go out, right? It's a balance, and it's like ebbing and flowing. But even with Derrick Henry, right? Could have argued that they draft a running back and they don't make the move to sign him, but you increase both your floor and your ceiling there. You free up the cap space and maybe add to your offense. But how is the offense going to look with Derrick Henry, with that offensive line? Going to be really intriguing, in my opinion, to just figure that all out. That's all I have for you here today, though, on this episode of Locked On Ravens Live. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Coming up tomorrow, or maybe later today if the Ravens make another move, we'll be talking more Ravens, getting into everything related to this team, and be talking more about Derrick Henry and how the offensive line could look. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.